I invite you to, if you have a candle, an acknowledgement candle, to go ahead and to get that as we light our acknowledgement candle, as the folks from our People of Color group share that with us too.
We light this candle in acknowledgement of the first peoples of this land, and to acknowledge that this land is stolen land. We recognize that this is the tribal land of the Luiseno Nation and the Kumeyaay Nation. May this flame continue to spark mindful awareness of these things that must be remembered and not go unspoken in our work of countering racial oppression. And so we light this candle in a good way and give thanks to the spirits of the land for their guiding presence among us.
We are grateful to our Palomar Fellowship People of Color group for lighting our acknowledgement candle this morning, recognizing that this is Indigenous Peoples Day, tomorrow is, and we encourage you to take a look at the links in the chat. Wherever you are, find out the land that you're on, and also we find out the ways that we can continue to be in partnership and in collaboration and in support of our Indigenous siblings. In a moment, I will invite the bell, remembering that we invite the bell 3 times. Once for those who have gone before, once for those who are with us now, and once for those who will follow. And we remember, we are creating a sanctuary for those seeking and finding their own answers to questions of faith. We create a sanctuary for voices lifted up for peace and justice. We create a sanctuary for those seeking companionship in our struggles and our journeys. Invite us into our call to worship and our chalice lighting this morning. So if you have a chalice, I invite you to light it along with me. We come with our hearts in a holy place, or entertaining the possibility, telling our stories, listening with loving minds, trusting wisdom, and as always, a voice arises. I invite you to light your chalice with me as well. What is it about this flame that opens our ears, asks the Reverend Scott Taylor, opens our hearts? Come back to your center, it calls. Return to that quiet space we long for, and that longs for us. From this stillness, always a voice arises if we let it. So come, friends, beloved ones. Let us once again listen. Let us find the flame inside that guides us back home. It is good to be together.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
I love words. I love the words of that song. Thank you, Kimberly. And one of the reasons I love serving as a worship associate for this fellowship is community, because I love words. And I've learned to love all words and phrases. Thank you, Reverend Carol Hilton, for helping me learn that lesson. I don't need to analyze a reading or a poem to see if it fits my personal credo. Instead, I can listen deeply and try to understand the words and know that the reading is meaningful and important to some who are listening. And I especially love the words of our covenant. I remember going to one of those town hall meetings, a listening meeting, where we developed our covenant together. We sat in a circle in the front of our sanctuary. We looked across at each other, seeing ourselves in each other's eyes. And we listened deeply, hearing our voices in each other's words. We reflected on 3 questions. What brought you here? What keeps you here? And how do we want to be together in this beloved community? How do we want to be treated? How do we want to treat others? I remember the specific words of some of the people who were in that meeting with me, even though it was a lot of years ago. We reflected, we shared our thoughts, we listened deeply. The words were collected on the big white easel, and there were other sessions. Words were collected and held and merged together to become our covenant. And when it's my privilege to begin the congregational covenant in a service, I always remember that time, and I see some of those faces in my mind, and I try to listen deeply to the words. And I invite you today to listen deeply. Some of the words are nouns, some are verbs, some are descriptive. You'll hear words like mutual, profound respect, grounded, enriched, sustained, and of course, together. Here's our prologue. Sometimes we call it our value statement. In mutual love and grace, we journey together, grounded in profound respect for a diversity of beliefs and ideas, sustained by service and shared ministry, enriched through collective spiritual deepening, and a safe environment for all generations to thrive. Please join in. Together, we are more than we would ever be alone. Therefore, we promise to practice radical hospitality, mindful communication, and active stewardship. Thus do we covenant with each other.
Was sitting in front of his tiny little cabin. He was sitting on one of only 3 chairs that he had. It was deep in the woods, and he was listening. Now, if you or I were there, we might not have thought there was anything to listen to. No airplanes flying overhead, no iPods, no television. Those things wouldn't be invented for more than 100 years. No radio from the neighbors. His nearest neighbor was Mr. Emerson, whose property his cabin was on, and he was more than a mile away, and he wouldn't have had a radio anyway. Even nature that Henry loved was quiet. It was getting along toward evening, and the birds had fallen silent. The wind was still. When he listened very, very carefully, he could hear just the tiniest sound of a little fish breaking the surface of a pond and splashing back down. He could hear the rustle of a mouse through the leaves. He could hear the birds settling down in the branches for the night. Now, the people in town, they could not understand why Henry had built this tiny little cabin away from all the people in the town, all of society, to be out by himself. He had built the cabin out of recycled materials from Mr. Emerson on his property out by the pond. It wasn't that Henry didn't like society. He liked sitting around with Mr. Emerson and others of their group. They called themselves the Transcendentalists because that was the philosophy that they were coming together to discuss and to figure out what they believed in. But more than that, Henry liked being out in nature. That reminded him of another story of Elijah in the Bible, in the Old Testament, when he had crawled out to a mountaintop to try to listen for the voice of his God. And while he was standing there on the top of the mountain in the cave, a huge wind came up and whipped around, and it was so loud and so strong that it picked up boulders and crashed them to the ground. And Elijah couldn't hear the voice of God in the wind. And when it stopped, there was an earthquake, and it shook the ground, and it roared. And Elijah was so awestruck, and he couldn't hear the voice of God in the earthquake. And then, there was a fire. It was so scary. It was huge and red and crackling and making an enormous noise as it roared up the mountain towards Elijah and his cave. But he couldn't hear the voice of God in the fire. And when everything stopped, the wind, the earthquake, the fire, and Elijah was just standing on the mountaintop, wrapped in his cloak and shivering, the silence fell. And Elijah could hear the still, small voice of his God. Now, Henry thought about that story, and he thought, I don't even know if I believe in Elijah's God, the one who was talking to him, but I do know that whatever the moreness, as our Reverend Beth will say, or the God of the universe, whatever that power is, I am a lot more likely to hear that in the still quiet of nature than from any minister who rants and raves in a sermon. And then Henry David Thoreau thought to himself, and a wind came up and ruffled his hair and broke the surface of the wind. And Henry listened with his very quietest inner ear, and his thoughts drifted away.
I still and small, and deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain, singing, calming my fears, quenching my tears. Through all the years, singing.
I sure didn't want that to end. Not sure I actually wanted Leanne's story to end either. I love it when I'm reminded to be still and to listen. I love, Susan, you bringing in the depth of listening and opening that came through our covenant process. Beloveds, would you breathe with me? As we consider these times where perhaps we have fears that need to be calmed, tears that need to be quenched. A time when I have invited you and myself to feel everything. And to have the assurance that deep inside all, there is a wisdom, a knower, a moreness, the Holy One, God, the still small voice. In these times, I need reminders of the stillness. I invite you to enter into that space of silence and honesty known by many names. You pray with me. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, voice still and small, we pause to listen, to hear, to hope for a new day, for a new way. We listen to our own longing or to our lostness, to our loneliness, and we hear the same in those around us. Voice still and small. We pray for the calming of fears, ours and our neighbors near and far. And may we sing with you, sing from you. May we each and all remember in these times that you are held in love and mystery deeper than you can know. How do you listen? What do you listen to? Where does your listening lead? There's so much to listen to, and there's so much noise all around us. We do have the planes overhead and the radios. So there's noise all around, in addition to whatever might be in our own heads. You know what I mean about that noise, right? Inside and out. Newsflash, clamoring for our attention. Pay attention to me. So much clamors for our attention. The poet Rilke in the Book of Hours, Love Poems to God, captures a longing for stillness, for a stillness to listen to source. He wrote, "If only for once it were still, if the not quite right and the why this could be muted, and the neighbor's laughter, and the static my senses make, if all of it didn't keep me from coming awake. If only for once it were still. If the not quite right and the why this could be muted." Can you imagine? And the neighbor's laughter, as much as we love it, and the static my senses make. If all of it didn't keep me from coming awake, then in one vast thousandfold thought, I could think you up to where thinking ends. I could possess you even for the brevity of a smile, to offer you to all that lives in gladness. How do you listen? What do you listen to? There is usually, for most of us, I think it's probably a human trait that we have an inner dialogue. Some of us known as a committee that has a whole lot to say about what I'm thinking or doing, or what someone else might be thinking or doing. And that has a tendency to interfere with hearing my own inner wisdom or source. Now, when I can stem the tide of the inner chatter, I can hear my inner wisdom. And even though I sometimes confuse them, they are not the same thing. Silence, stillness, make space for that to come through. It is a container in which wisdom can be held long enough for me to hear. Presence is listening to our lives, bringing an active awareness of our way of being in the world. And these days, lately, we've learned so much about the importance of listening to our bodies, of embodied wisdom, knowing that our bodies have wisdom. Our bodies are just the place our memories call home. And in somatic healing, we hear that the body keeps score as well. So once I can get into that place, in the wisdom of my body, I can enter into a knowing. And the body is speaking to us all the time. It has so much to say about who we are, where we came from. I spent 7 hours yesterday listening to my body, going through exercises that gave me the opportunity to really pay attention. In fact, I would say the latest enterprise that I'm engaged in is embodiment and embodied practices, because I am sure that we can tend to neglect our bodies, even for those of us who work out or run. There's another way of connecting with our bodies that allow our bodies to share with us. And I'm going to invite us for just a couple of minutes to invite you to listen to your body. And this is just a noticing. So take a breath with me, will you? Just take a breath. I invite you to look around where you are. Look around the room or the space that you're in. And just let your eyes land on whatever you see around you. Just take it in. And go ahead and look behind you as well. And even look up. Look up at the ceiling. Feel the space around you or the spaciousness. And what does your space feel like? Does it feel comfortable? Is it the place where you sit all the time in these COVID days? Just notice. And now I invite you to let your gaze land on something that is beautiful to you, that's in your space. And I invite you to go ahead and take a moment or two and put what you see into the chat if you would like to do that. That's just an invitation. If you want to put in what you see in your space and even what it felt like to look around. The Buddha, trees, green plants out in the sunroom. Oh, Tessa's handprint. Oh, her handsome husband, growing things, green things, plant babies, granddaughter's picture. Picture gifts that kids have given for Mother's Day. Pumpkins and fires and me, a tall green tree with straight tan branches, leaves moving ever so slowly, small pumpkins, a bouquet of dried flowers and gourds, a loquat tree in bloom, 2 mockingbirds in it, flower arrangement in your wedding colors. Blue and white porcelain candelabra. A top hat and wedding veil, a dog on the lap, a painting that Charlotte made, husband sculptures and plants. We tend to think of listening with our ears, which I am going to invite us to do as well. But we also listen to our bodies and to our surroundings by what we take in. So breathe with me again. And allow the breath to bring you back into your center. And see how the breath feels inside your body. And now I invite you to attend to the sounds around you. Sounds in your space, outside of your space. Maybe traffic. Maybe someone in the other room. Maybe birds. Listen for what is immediate and perhaps even extend that listening out if it's available to you. Rest in the hearing, the musical voices of family in the next room. Go ahead and put in what you're hearing in the chat if you feel like it, if you'd like to do that. Hmm. And now, oh, my birds, yes. Faraway traffic. Haha. Marianne can't tell the difference between her birds and mine. Neighbors' dogs. Friend talking on the phone. There is always so much to listen to. In this practice, we focus on what's around us so that we connect with what is within us. Jingling of a bell on your cat's collar. Take another breath and keep putting things in the chat if you'd like. Listening to ourselves and our source and to what is around us reveals to us new possibilities in understanding ourselves. We observe and simply notice what happens and what's revealed to us. And we do that with love and longing for the possibilities that are disclosed. I commend to you the practice of listening to self and source. Our body's wisdom, our inner wisdom. Being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. Being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. These words are written by David Augsburger, who I recently learned is a graduate of my own seminary, Claremont School of Theology. And he wrote them in a book called Caring Enough to Hear and Be Heard. And as I looked at the canon of his work, it was a lot about hearing and listening and being heard. So we listen to self and source. We listen to what's around us. We attend so that we can also be fully present to the other in front of us. This listening to others is a practice that also invites us into silence and reflection and into presence. Have you ever spoken to someone who, when you're speaking with them, they listen to you like you are the only person in the world? I keep coming back when I think about this, and even shared it with you before. It's like nothing exists but you and that person. And my colleague, Jay McDaniel, is like that. I've shared about him before. Whenever I've spoken with him, and I've seen him do it with other people, with anyone who is in front of him, he's completely present. And it's not like he's thinking, oh, now I'm listening to this other person. You can see that he listens with his whole self. Now, the fact is, I don't know what he's thinking, right? I mean, he could be thinking, oh gosh, he's really going on and on. I've never experienced that as a feeling. It feels like he's bringing to the interaction his presence, his undivided attention. I want to be more like Jay. Jay has the gift of presence. This type of listening affirms us, and when we feel heard, we're able to understand ourselves more. We're able to see and look at ourselves in new ways and enter into right relations with one another, as Susan spoke about so beautifully, Susan, about our covenant and the process of this deep listening. Yeah, we had listening circles where we heard one another so that we would articulate how we want to be together. And this kind of listening takes a type of silence, being still while another person speaks. And it's quieting our urge to think of our own response before they're even through speaking. With silence, again, becomes a container for this marvelous alchemical process of communion. The sacred art of listening is what one person called it. And then it becomes a sacred communion, a listening from the heart with the heart. Reflection gives access to listening for an inner voice, the practice of taking a few breaths before responding to a situation. To a question or a comment, it gives us time for our true wisdom to be revealed, and also for us to bring our full and authentic self to the interaction. And this is hard. It's hard for a number of reasons, not the least of which it seems that our minds run ahead of the person who's talking. That's it. The average person speaks at a rate of 120 to 150 words per minute, but our brains can process more than 500 words a minute. So have you noticed that for yourself? Maybe I'm the only one. Uh-oh, I see a few panelist heads nodding. Thank you for that. And I notice my head running, and I bring myself, when I can, back to the moment, back to the breath, and especially when it's something that's hard to hear. Breathe. Be present. And that listening then does take presence, being with the person in front of us just where they are, not judging what they're saying to us, or aware that we're judging what we're saying to them, what they're saying to us. I think it might be a stretch, and it just could be me. Some of you may have mastered this better than I. I may be judging what a person is saying, but I can be aware that I'm judging what the person is saying. I'm looking for perfection, for not for perfection, but for practice. I can be aware of not thinking of my next response or how wrong they are or how different they are. When I am able to do that, it's as if there's this holy reality, a sacred source that's present when true listening happens. And in this communion, where dialogue happens, we create a space where we allow for fresh ideas and insights to come through. Feminist theologian Nell Morton gave us the phrase that we hear each other into speech. And this was specifically women hearing one another into speech when speech was so, women did not speak publicly and were not heard. Oh, I guess that still happens. So I invite you into how you listen to the other. And listen for the sounds that you most love. You listen for your own children's laughters or cries, the voice of your beloved, the familiar, gentle creaking of an old floorboard assures us that all is well, or birds. We listen to life, and we listen for life. You've indicated what you were listening to. What is it that you listen for in your life? And if you want to just invite you to put that into the chat, if you will, if you want. Not just what are you listening to, but in your life, what do you listen for? I listen and anticipate hearing my family say later on today, "Hey, Bethy." Laughter, quiet space and laughter. Wind chimes. A comfortable silence. My grandkids' conversations. Things that make me think, positive words, for pauses in words, for a piano being played, for someone who understands my feelings. Listen to what my body tells me it needs, for the happy sound in my daughter's voice and her laugh, a gentle look on a face. We listen also, I listen to the world. Recently, this spring, I guess, we did a service on Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of compassion, who listens for the cries of the world. When we listen to our inner wisdom and the source that we're connected to, and we listen to each other, and we listen to the rest of nature, we listen to the rest of the world. This is a month where there's some important listening that we can continue to do. This is LGBTQ History Month. In a time when the rights of those of us who are LGBTQ are threatened by a Supreme Court appointment, it is important for us to listen to our queer congregants, neighbors, those across who are feeling threatened and who are threatened. Today is Coming Out Day. Listen to the coming out stories of those who know that in this political climate, their very being is threatened. Listen to the stories that are not like your own. Tomorrow, as we said earlier, is Indigenous Peoples Day. We're called to continue to listen to the voices of our Indigenous neighbors, to listen to their struggle, to listen to their call for justice. It is for us to continue to listen to the words of Black Lives Matter. It's important also to listen to words that we don't necessarily want to hear. In other words, to listen to words that challenge our deepest moral values so that we can fully see and hear what is being said, that we may listen and come from our own values to counter what we're hearing. It counters the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We listen to the beauty and we listen to the hearts crying for compassion. We listen to the hearts beating for justice, and we listen to hearts longing for peace. Listen. What is the world saying to you in this moment? What do you hear? If you want to go ahead and put that in the chat. What in these days, oh, Clergy Appreciation Day, thank you, Leanne. What is the world calling for when you hear the world? Listening for a story of questioning, justice, laughter, sharing, song. I'm listening, peace and unity. I'm listening carefully to what candidates say so that I can understand and know and lead from my values. Forward together, not one step back. Listen for respect. Listen for voices and body language. I'm curious in building a future that is hopeful, creative, and collaborative. I have brown-skinned children, and I listen for a healthy future for them. Yes. Where it's a thank you, compassion, acceptance, understanding, change, understanding, and compassion. I'm listening for people to talk to one another, even if they disagree. I'm listening carefully to what candidates don't say. Listening for equal opportunity for all. There is so much to listen to. There is so much, again, that clamors for our attention, and there's a clamoring, and then there's an invitation. I'm not sure that clamoring is always a bad thing when there is injustice. So, and this time of what does it mean to be an expectation of empathy, in this time, this month, where we ask the question, what does it mean to be a people of deep listening? I invite you into that layered understanding of listening, listening to the self, including our bodies, listening to that still small voice, listening to one another, to our intimates, to those beyond us, to those we don't agree with, to those in the political sphere, and to this beautiful world that is always calling to us. Like wild geese high in the clear blue sky, announcing over and over our place in the family of things, in the words of Mary Oliver. Listening to speakers' openness and how their words have an effect on the receiver. We are always, always listening. When we bring our presence to listening, we open to the world, and it moves us to action. Beloveds, I want to invite you one more time back into your body. Would you do that with me? Will you breathe with me? And come back into your body. You've done a lot of listening this morning. Take a minute and check in on your body. Would you do that? Is there a tightness? Is there a relaxation after having time of listening? Notice and breathe into your body wherever it needs attention. And let us bring the listening of our hearts, our minds, our bodies, and our spirits to this beautiful, broken, yearning, hopeful world. Be, breathe, and know that you are loved. Listen always for love and know that it is there. I love you.
We gather each week in community to acknowledge all the things that we share with one another. We share our time, our talents, we share our presence, and we share our resources so that we can sustain this fellowship with active stewardship. We live our values by sharing half of our undesignated collection with a local nonprofit organization. I'm so happy that this quarter, our plate share goes to Camp de Benneville Pines, our Pacific Southwest Camp and Conference Center that is way up in the San Bernardino National Forest near the little village of Angeles Oaks. If you're currently in a position to give or continue making your pledge, there are many ways you can do this, even as we shelter in place. You can mail a check to our office. You can check in with our office administrator to find out how to set up auto payments. Or it's really easy to go to our Breeze database and make a donation there. Soon you'll see on our screen how easy it is to donate through text to give. Give that a try. It's really fun.
Thank you, Susan, for reminding us the importance of Camp de Benneville Pines. One of my memories of listening was actually my first and only time up at camp, when I was stopped in my tracks hearing the wind in the trees up there. It just stopped me in my tracks. It was such a beautiful sound. So, beloveds, as we move into the next thing, one of the things that I think of when I think of listening and I think of hearing is I think of answering. So what is calling to us? And what are we called to answer, Kimberly? I think we might be wanting to answer the call of love. What do you think?
I think that is absolutely. And so if you would all join me in our chalice extinguishing words. Although we extinguish this flame, we carry in our hearts the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment until we are together again. And let us all shout to the world the promise of our spirit. The We are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
Thank you, Kimberly, for everything. Friends, as we go forth knowing that there is a call on our hearts and a call of love, and we are invited to answer that call. So I invite you to go in peace, be makers of peace and justice.